Exploring the Puranic vision of the universe. The work of the Bihs. In this video, I will be summarizing research and theories by members, collaborators and friends of the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies, BIHS. For the most part, with a focus on the fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavat Purana. Known as the Spotless Purana, it was first spoken by Sukadeva Swami to Maharaj Parikshit just over 5,000 years ago. Later it was transcribed into Sanskrit, and much more recently it was translated into English by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We begin our journey into Puranic cosmology in the spiritual realm. Krishna, the all-beautiful personality of Godhead, his associates and various forms belong in this blissful place. To accommodate those souls who voluntarily choose to go elsewhere, a dark cloud manifests. This is called the Mattattva, or the material world. Krishna expands in the form of Karanadakshay Vishnu and lies within, upon the causal ocean. Innumerable Brahmandalas, or universes, emanate from his breathing. His glance upon the previously unmanifest energy activates the material nature personified as Durga Devi, and the personification of the glance itself is Lord Shiva. With Karanadakshay Vishnu's breathing in and out, the universes are created and annihilated. This is the basis of Kala, the time representative of Krishna that controls all aspects of the material manifestation. Now let's close in to focus on our Brahmandala universe. The first subtle element that each universe includes is false ego, inherited from the conditioned souls. Interestingly, it's about the size of our galaxy. Through various subtle and gross elemental interactions, the layer of ego condenses into intelligence, which then condenses into mind, then into the gross elements, ether, air, fire, water, and finally earth. Entering into the Hiranyagarbha, Brahma's egg-shaped universe, Garbhadakshay Vishnu lies on the Garbhodaka ocean. A lotus stem emanates from his navel. The birth of Lord Brahma on the lotus flower is the secondary creation. The creation of realms in this universe are divided into 14 planetary divisions, which are stacked vertically. Underneath them, dominating the bottom half of the universe, is the Garbhodaka ocean. Lord Brahma is also the origin of all life throughout the universe. Each following generation of his produces offspring which gradually occupy all the planetary levels below his realm. So humanoid beings, demigods, with various degrees of power can be found throughout the universe. The middle planetary systems, which includes the Earth, includes humans like us. But remember, we are not alone. The universe is dissected in half by a horizontal disk. Called Bhumandala, it includes many concentric circles named after various lands and exotic oceans, closing in. In the centre of Bhumandala is Mount Meru, which sits at the centre of the mountainous island of Jambudvip. Meru's height is nearly 800,000 miles above Jambudvip. On the top of Meru, we find an abode for Lord Brahma, and cities of the gods lie in 8 directions. To Jambudvip south is Bharatvash, a tract of land occupied by the conditioned souls engaged in fruitive work. We now journey through the higher realms. Situated above Bhumandala and beyond our perceptive ability, beginning with Bhavaloka, the abode of Rakshasas and Upadevas, and, level by level, passing over various heavenly regions, until We reached the topmost planet, Satyaloka, where Lord Brahma resides. The demigods, populating the more elevated regions, are empowered representatives of the Lord who have various universal functions. Delving below Bhumandala to the lower regions, one encounters Bilgasvarg, 7 subterranean worlds inhabited by Asuric beings. Below them are the hellish realms, where in the course of transmigration a person is subject to reconditioning before entering their next body. Back to the horizontal disk of Bhumandala. The Bhagavatam explains that the sun circumambulates Meru clockwise on its daily journey, like the spinning of a potter's wheel. However, it also talks about an annual counterclockwise motion of the sun relative to Bhumandala. This is because the sun goes around the ecliptic counterclockwise once per year. The Bhagavatam resolves this seeming contradiction by describing the motion of ants on a potter's wheel. It compares the view of an observer on the wheel compared to an observer at the side of the wheel. So it acknowledges the movements of the sun in terms of relative points of view. That, of course, is from a geocentric, Earth-centered perspective. With that in mind, I want to move on to a very different text, yet still hailing from ancient India. The Surya Siddhanta is a work on astronomy and timekeeping within the tradition of the Jyotisha Vedanga. The Surya Siddhanta explores risings and settings of the sun and moon, solstices, planetary conjunctions, and the stars. It also looks into astrological instruments like sundials and Kapili yantras and armillary spheres, which are related to astrolabes. The Surya Siddhanta itself claims that it originated long ago in the Satyayuga. Dr. Richard Thompson, alias Sadaputadas, published a paper which uses archaeoastronomy to suggest a possible composition date of 25,000 to 55,000 years ago. We do know that a citation of the Surya Siddhanta was in the works of the 5th century mathematician and astronomer Aryabhata. His contemporary Rava Mihira summarized the Surya Siddhanta within his work Panchasiddhantika. Bhaskaracharyya of the 12th century then modified it and wrote a commentary called the Siddhanta Shriyamani. In around 1860, Reverend Ebenezer Burgess translated that work into English. Yet soon afterwards, Bimal Prasad Dutta translated Bhaskaracharyya's work into Bengali. He was an expert in Vedic astronomy and astrology and founded a school. Later, however, he had a change of direction and he took to the holy order of sannyas, becoming known as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He focused wholly on Krishna Bhakti as revealed in the scriptures like the Bhagavat Purana. Now, the Surya Siddhanta describes a solar system recognizable to modern astronomers, quite unlike the Puranas. And it's not just a difference of approach. For example, 1 yojana in the Bhagavat Purana is about 8 miles. However, 1 yojana in the Surya Siddhanta is about 5 miles. Given that the Vedic scriptures give a geocentric view of the solar system, unlike the sun-centered version, the planets move in epicycles, like the image here on the right. This approach is actually not surprising, given that ancient Indian astronomy was organically related to astrology, together with the paradigm of a populated universe. When it comes to space, there's actually nothing wrong with a geocentric view. After all, Sir Fred Hoyle wrote, "The difference between a heliocentric theory and a geocentric theory is of relative motion only, and that such a difference has no physical significance." But now let's look at the parallels between the Surya Siddhanta and modern astronomy. Chapters 4 to 6 presents rules for calculating the times of the solar and lunar eclipses. They're based on the same theory of eclipses in modern astronomy, and they're no less accurate. The Geocentric agrees that solar eclipses are caused by the passage of the moon in front of the sun. There's only one notable difference from the modern view, that this visual spectacle includes a separate planet, or graha, Rahu. This is another example of how Vedic astrology and astronomy sometimes cross paths. There is a very close alignment when it comes to the amount of days the planets take to make one full cycle around the Earth. In the Geocentric 12:53-54 we read, "As the shape of the Earth is spherical, people in each place think themselves to be uppermost, but as the globe of Earth is situated in ether, what then is its upper and lower side?" Chapter 1, verse 59 describes the diameter of the Earth as 1,600 yojanas. That's about 8,000 miles, very close to the modern figure of 7,926. The modern version of the Moon is 2,159 miles diameter and nearly 1.5 million miles for its path orbiting the Earth. Using trigonometry, we learn that the Geocentric has something similar. It just has a moon a little larger and a little further away. Now the diameters of the planets. I source this from Sadhaputta Das's entry in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, published in 1997. I'll summarise. Surya Siddhanta 713 reads, "The diameters upon the moon's orbit of Mars, Saturn, Mercury, Jupiter and Venus are reduced to 150 miles, 187.5, 225, 262.5 and 300 miles. Now the 12th chapter lists the planet's orbital distances. Get one point of a triangle from the centre of the Earth, extend its sides up to the orbital distance of the Moon, and for the third side use the figures from chapter 7. You get what is called the angular diameter of each planet. Now continue those lines to the planet's orbital circumference in chapter 12. The greater the reduced diameter and the greater the orbital distance, that obviously leads to the greater diameter of a planet." And wow, we get very similar figures to the modern ones. Let's compare. Diameter of Mars, Geocentric 3,771.7 miles. Modern 4,191. Quite similar. Saturn 73,882 miles. Modern 72,000 miles. Impressive. Mercury, Geocentric just over 3,000 miles. Modern is, well, just a little more. Now if the figure for Jupiter is doubled, it fits in very well with the modern. And note the radius into diameter formula also applies to Venus. Significantly, chapter 7 verse 13 does list Jupiter and Venus together at the end of the verse. Now, distances of planets from the Sun. Using figures from the Geocentric, one can calculate the relative distance between the Sun and the planets of the solar system. Our basis is 1 astronomical unit, AU, between the Sun and the Earth. Now let's bring in the other planets. Comparing the Geocentric to modern AU, the figures are similar for Mercury, Venus, and also Mars. Let's look at the outer planets too. The Geocentric 5.07 for Jupiter, modern figure 5.2, and the Geocentric's measurement for the distance of Saturn is also consistent. A fascinating comparison. The size of the universe. The Geocentric reads, "Multiply the number of revolutions of the moon in a kalpa by the moon's orbit. That is the size of this Brahmandala universe." Given one kalpa is 4.32 billion years long, we reach a figure consistent with 1290 of the Geocentric, which states the circumference of heaven is, well, over 18 quadrillion yojanas. If we do our calculations, we find that the Brahmandala is about 16,000 light years in diameter. Note that the modern estimate of the diameter of our Milky Way galaxy is 100,000 light years. But hold on. One could argue we still have to add all those huge elemental layers I mentioned earlier. Information stored in the Surya Siddhanta proves that advanced astronomical knowledge was known in ancient India. In fact, some knowledge would have required telescopes or some other means of seeing beyond the naked eye. So we shouldn't dismiss the related Puranic tradition as sentiment or mythological. After all, many great devotee scholars base their lives upon it. How do we deal with the apparent conflict between Puranic cosmology and observable astronomy? Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada assigned this task to his Bhaktivedanta Institute, the BI, in 1976. Dr. Fudam Damodar Singh recalled that Prabhupada specifically instructed them to build a model of the universe for the temple of the Vedic Planetarium in Mayapur, West Bengal. In pursuance of this, Dr. Richard Thompson, Sadhaputta Das, a founding member of the BI, authored the book Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy, and he once explained, "This apparent conflict in understanding the fifth canon is not something new, and it is not a conflict between Vedic literature and modern scientific understanding. Actually, there's a whole body of Vedic literature which describes the Earth as a small globe, and this literature is what Srila Prabhupada in his purports refers to as Jyoti Veda, or the Jyotisha Shastra." So before looking at the BI's research on Virod Parihara, the reconciliation of systems, let's take a brief look at the way this issue has been handled in the past. The Surya Siddhanta 12:33-35 states, "Within this earth globe lie the 7 underworlds inhabited by the snakes, nagas, and demons, asuras. In the middle of the earth globe and protruding out on both sides is Mount Meru. Here Meru takes the role of the Earth's spin axis. Above, northwards, are located the demigod Indra and great sages. Below, southwards, is the habitat of all the demons." This simple map shown here of the extensive Bhumandala plain placed onto the Earth globe was sometimes known as the Standard Accommodation. It was taken up by Lala, an 8th century Indian astronomer. Chapter 19 of his treatise, the Sishyadivriddhita Tantra, reads, "The Salt Sea is to the south of those who live on the equator. The land to the north is the Dambudweep. The Sea of Milk is to the south of the Salt Sea. They say that the Saptadweep is in between them. Inside the earth there are 7 patalas or interterranean regions. They are the abodes of the Danavas. There are divine plants, various precious stones, mercury, mines, and other divine things." Bhaskaraacharya could not reconcile the relatively small diameter of the earth compared with the immense magnitude attributed to it by Puranic scholars. After all, the huge Bhumandala means earth circle. In his Siddhanta Shriyamani 321, Bhaskaraacharya noted that most learned astronomers conclude that Jambudweep covers the entire northern hemisphere, and the 6 dweeps and 7 seas are all in the southern hemisphere. Around 1500 AD, Gyanaraj authored Siddhanta Sundara, the first major Siddhanta produced within the Jyotisha tradition since Bhaskaraacharya. In the first English translation of this treaty, published in 2014, Dr. Tukey Knudsen observed, "Traditionally, the approach of the Indian astronomers was to incorporate certain elements of the cosmology of the Puranas into their model, while rejecting others. In contrast, Gyanaraj's approach was to seek a synthesis, which preserves the authority of the Puranas while still maintaining the basic cosmological model. The 17th century Maharaj Jaisingh commissioned Jantar Mantar observatories around India, including in his own capital city of Jaipur. The well-known Jaisingh globe is a classical example of the standard accommodation model. Vamsidar, a highly respected commentator within a legacy of Vaishnavacharyas, discusses the apparent conflict in his work, the Bhavarta Dipika Prakash. Then how can one explain the contradiction between the Bhagavat and the Jyotish Shastra? The earth has two forms. One is the particular form of big measure, and the other is the smaller, spherical form. In accordance with the Puranas, Sukadeva Goswami has spoken of the big measure of the earth, and only suggested the small measure. Our final example is Tiruvenkat Ramanuja Jiyaswami, who has provided much inspiration for further research with his models, which are based on the Puranic descriptions. In his Mysteries of the Sacred Universe, Dr. Richard Thompson notes that Tiruvenkat Swami's solar system model is the same as that of the famous Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe. In both models, all of the planets except the Earth orbit the Sun, and the Sun orbits the Earth. These models reproduce exactly the relative motions of the planets while leaving the Earth at the centre. We will now transition from the Virod Parihar discussion and mention the work of Giorgio de Santillana and Herval von Deschamps. Hamlets Mill, an essay investigating the origins of human knowledge and its transmission through myth, published in 1969. Their extensive research discussing celestial models in historical world cultures describes a cosmic earthplane embedding accurate astronomy. They argue that a number of apparently mythological accounts were not necessarily fictitious, but often represented accurate descriptions of celestial cosmology. According to Hamlets Mill, ancient cultures used two different planes that would be both referred to as Earth. One is the ecliptic plane, which is the apparent path of the Sun on its yearly journey through the belt of the zodiac. And the other is the equator plane, which is represented by a planisphere. But let's now look at the proposed models of the Puranic universe by scholars within ISKCON. After extensive research between 2004 and 2007, Danavir Goswami published a number of materials on Vedic cosmology. Some of his work was inspired by the diagrams of Tiruvenkat Swami. For example, compare this model with Danavir Goswami's image of the Earth sphere as one of the 9 islands created by the sons of Sagara. His approach to Puranic cosmology has also been influenced by the astronomical treaty Bhugola Varanam by Sri Varivaj Tirtha, a 16th century polymath in the line of Madhvacharya. A partial version of the translation by Badrinarayan Murthy is included in Danavir Goswami's publication Bhugola Tattva, along with an image of the translator's so-called golf ball model. That shows the Earth globe perched on a mountain extending up from Bharatvash. Prior to Danavir Goswami's books, Richard Thompson, Sadaputadas, divided the description of Jambudreep and the rings of Bhumandala into at least 4 separate models. He compares his multiple meaning concept with a Krishna painting, when a number of different pastimes are represented in a single frame. But why would the Bhagavatam's 5th canto do this? It can be confusing. One proposal is that it preserves a large amount of information in relatively few words, perhaps like packing a single suitcase with separate items, taking that suitcase on a journey, then later unpacking specific items when you need them. So let's look at those models. First one, the mountainous regions of Central Asia. Here's a topological map of Jambudweep, the black lines being the mountains and the blue the rivers. The yellow lines represent the base and sides of Mount Meru. Now compare that to the mountain ranges of Central Asia. Similar. Thompson also compares the Babatam's names of those mountain ranges to what we call them today. Second model, the heavenly realms. Now the Earth is tiny in comparison with the huge mountains of Jambudweep. At about 8 miles per yojana, the mountains and trees are thousands of miles high, and you got fruit the size of elephants and rivers of pure mango juice. In chapter 16 of the 5th canto, there are exotic lakes, one that tastes like milk, and others like honey, sugarcane juice, and so forth. In chapter 17, we read that the tract of land on the southern edge of Jambudweep is Bharatvash. But in the other 8 Vashas, after returning from the heavenly planets, humans there enjoy the remaining results of their pious activities. Third model, the Earth plane. For this, we need to look at the Earth presented as a flat stereographic projection. This makes the Earth into a planisphere model, which corresponds with 5th canto verses describing the hottest annual path of the Sun upon the Earth's surface. This model also fits the daily path of the Sun during the equinoxes. Note that, like in the Surya Siddhanta, this model supports Mount Meru as being located at the North Pole. The fourth model, the geocentric solar system. The edges of Bhumandala's concentric circles of Sakadweep, Kraunchadweep, Pushkaradweep, Manasatra Mountain, and the freshwater ocean correspond closely with the distances of the geocentric orbits of Mars, Mercury, and Venus. Let's move on to the outer circles of Bhumandala. Land of living beings matches Ceres in the asteroid belt. The edges of the Golden Land match Jupiter and Saturn. Beyond Saturn and the Loka mountain is Alokavash, the dark region. Its outer edge matches the barely visible orbit of Uranus. Now for Charanarenu Das's Vedic Planetarium Immersion Experience concept. For the project, she recommended a simple approach for the temple's main dome, using the equatorial plane as Bhumandala, represented in the floor of the main temple hall, Meru as the North Pole, and displaying the movement of the heavenly bodies according to observation. For her, the more technical aspects of the 5th canto descriptions should be in separate exhibits. The next major model was by Antodreep Das, who is currently the Director of Research for the Planetarium Department of Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. He has developed a beautiful chandelier model for display in the main dome. His proposal of projecting the sphere of the Earth onto a map of Saptadweep reveals intriguing correlations between its rings and the major latitudinal markers on the globe. Rishiraj Das is an author on religion and science. In the first chapter of Mystic Universe, he explains the basis of his perspective. In Vedic philosophy, all objects big and small are models, i.e. conceptual and not physical entities. Rishiraj explains the universe as hierarchical, that differs in consciousness according to one's level or viewpoint. It is like an inverted tree, which seems to relate to the vertical aspect of the Puranic universe. The higher dimensions are invisible to us because, unlike the demigods, we don't see the world with our subtle body made of mind, intelligence and ego. To Rishiraj, the subtle body is a conceptual description of an object. And to him, the Garbhodaka Ocean, for example, is not a literal body of water, but rather a primordial state which denotes all the things that can occur in the universe. One could say it is the womb of potential. The huge mountains on the island of Jambureep, to him, represent barriers in which a change of consciousness is necessary to cross over them. The higher the mountain, the greater the yogic effort necessary to enter the next realm. You see, when discussing higher levels in the universe far beyond our perception, all we can do is use words and concepts that the audience is already familiar with. How can one explain a laptop and everything it does to a monkey? And how would that monkey describe it to his fellow primates? But I think a better example is within the human species itself. The biblical account of Ezekiel's vision of angels and wheels in the sky may be imagined a certain way by a 17th century artist, but quite differently by a modern artist who has obviously had much more exposure to technology and modern culture. Back to the models. As far as flat earth theories go, Maheshwar Das has been a frequently contributor to the Sampradaya Sun, a Vaishnav news site. One of his earlier posts, published in 2016, Sailing to Jambureep, the Mayapur Vedic Planetarium and the Flat Earth, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, invokes NASA conspiracy theories to support his contention that the Earth is not physically spherical, but literally flat. In 2018, Pavaneshwar Das published Bhagavat Cosmology, which, like Dadavirga Swami, was influenced by Sri Vadivaj Tirtha. In his model, Bhumandala is depicted as a solid plane within a depth of 800,000 miles in the centre, gradually tapering as it extends towards a circular Lokaloka mountain range, then continuing to a radial distance of 1 billion miles. His detailed analysis reveals a number of parallels with contemporary astronomical calculations. Prem Gaurangadas also drew upon similar models while exploring Earth-Sun parameters that correspond with observational astronomical phenomena such as perihelion and aphelion distances and polar declination. In his approach, a model of Bhumandala closely aligns with the equatorial plane while maintaining a constant 3.5 degree angle. Drawing from Rishiraj's work, Vrindavan Priyadas, based in California's Silicon Valley, has similarly embraced a consciousness-centered analysis embedded within Puranic and Siddhantic models for developing a series of presentations utilized for ISKCON outreach. The recent work by a scholar based in Australia, Sulabhadas, focuses on both the physical representations and philosophical arguments rooted within Puranic and Jyotisha text. In the introduction to a forthcoming volume, The Puranic Geography of Bharatvash, Sulabha writes that the Earth appears as a vast, immobile, flat plane, yet simultaneously has mathematical features that resemble a sphere in space. Interestingly, when he models the flat feature, the islands off the south coast of Jambureep are represented by the different continents on the Earth, rather than having the Earth as one of the islands. Murali Gopal Das is taking a fresh approach, examining the mathematical relationships drawn from the perspective of Bhumandala as the horizontal plane as experienced by an observer. From this particular vantage point, the observer is central. The spinal column represents Mount Meru, and the chakras connect with the lokas. Dwija Govindadas has concentrated his research on the vertical dimension by mathematically treating the yojana as a sliding scale, applied to the heights of the locus. One approach takes into consideration the proportionality coefficient between Puranic and Siddhantic sizes of the universe and the distances of the stars and locus within it. The inverse distance time proportional theory examines how distances within the universe may be differently perceived according to different lifespans at particular cosmic levels. For example, inhabitants of Brahmaloka would perceive the universe to be comparable in size to the solar system. Kanupas has a radial distance from Earth comparable to the height of Swargaloka. This star is also identified with the Vedic sage Agastya, which in many ancient cultures was the southern pole. In this calculation, the perceived diameter of the universe for modern human beings on Earth of today would be 2.17 billion light years. In modern astronomy, that would be about 5 times the size of Laniakea supercluster, of which our galaxy is a tiny part. In this way, Dweja found intriguing parallels with contemporary calculations. His approach entertains the possibility that vertical distances in the Puranic universe could be logarithmic. At a conference about Puranic and Siddhantic cosmology in Mumbai in 2022, Girit Haridas presented his analysis of an article by R. Kaimi of Padua University in Italy. By correlating the ocean widths of Bhumandala with the Titius-Bode law, he introduced evidence that the heliocentric model of the solar system is embedded within. This adds weight to Thomson's argument that Bhumandala is related to the solar system, and like his geocentric model, Giridhari's model includes the orbit of Ceres and extends up to the orbit of Uranus. Drutakamadas Michael Cremo, a member of the Museum of the Vedic Planetarium's exhibit committee, acknowledged that much research has focused on the structure of the universe, but he suggested that just as much attention should be given to creation, a prominent feature in Puranic literature. Addressing this concern, Dr. Doug Watson has explored Cyclic Universe scenarios in his presentation to the BIHS in 2022 towards a comprehensive picture of the nature of space-time and the origin and fate of the universe. He discussed sastric perspectives of a cyclic universe and their teleological implications. And finally, Trunadas Brahmachari from Bhaktivedanta in the UK has taken up the task to build a physical working model of the geocentric solar system. With some input from Radha Mohan Das, it includes Mount Meru in the exact centre, with global Earth nearby, with its north pole pointing to the pole star. Fascinatingly, the very practical task of getting the planets to move mechanically has afforded them the opportunity to include the vertical dimension as described in chapter 22 of the 5th canto. Earlier, we asked the question, how do we deal with the apparent conflict between Puranic cosmology and observable astronomy? In a relevant article by Michael Cremo, Drutakamadas, called 5th Canto Cosmology as a Vision of the Virat Varup, he writes, "The astronomical details should not be taken as imaginative. Understanding this is critical for ISKCON scholars and scientists advising on the design of exhibits for the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium." Following the line of historical research on this subject, the recent re-emergence of interest has spurred over a dozen scholars within ISKCON to delve in. Richard Thompson observed that for centuries, Puranic cosmology has seemed incomprehensible to most, and this has encouraged many people either to reject it or to accept it literally with unquestioning faith. but careful study of the seeming contradictions highlights a number of overlapping, self-consistent perspectives drawing upon the same fifth canto text to model the Brahmanda in different ways. As individuals, we live for a very short time on a tiny globe within the unimaginable vastness of time and space. The insignificance of our position within the universe is mirrored in Sukadeva Goswami's quote in the Srimad Bhagavatam 5.16.4. This material world is a transformation of the material qualities, yet no one could possibly explain it perfectly, even in a lifetime as long as that of Brahma. No one in the material world is perfect, and an imperfect person could not describe this material universe accurately. We should understand that the complete material creation, the Virat Rup or universal form of the Lord, is forever beyond the grasp of our tiny brains. Perhaps we can therefore accept that the reality of this world can appear differently according to one's vantage point, level of consciousness, breadth of experience, and, significantly, spiritual awareness. After all, the aim of the Bhagavad Purana is not to provide us with a detailed blueprint of the universe, but rather to encourage us to re-establish a loving relationship with the Supreme Lord and return to his abode. So, as we ponder our place in this vast creation, in all humility, let us pray that for the glorification of Lord Krishna, we may present fifth canto Cosmology in the temple of the Vedic planetarium as we have heard by disciplic succession, Yata Shutam, and understood by our intelligence, Yata Mati. Thanks for watching.